Welcome to Essential Ingredients. Today we have on Tamar Kamen. She's an independent product developer in the beauty industry with over 20 years of experience. And I'm super excited to have her on, A, because she's a great wealth of knowledge, but also because she's a good friend.
I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks, Tamar. So we're doing a special series, and this series is focused on the impact of food on the future of beauty. So I'd love to just get your take on that, and then we'll go back to how we got there.
Sure. Food and beauty. I think that, at least for product development, you can get inspiration anywhere. And food and chefs have become really a celebrity venture, I guess now. There's a lot more prestige associated with food and a lot more experimentation and farm to table. All of that has really evolved over the last, 20 years. So that interest, I think, has made its way into beauty as well, because people hope that their products are going to be somewhat natural or derived from something that they can often pronounce. So I think that as society has become more interested in food in a supermarket or in a restaurant, that has impacted the beauty industry with new ingredients, new innovation, new sources, hydroponic, that did not exist for a lot of us a while ago, but now you can source not only lettuce, but you can potentially source ingredients that you use in skincare without soil.
Wow. So if we're looking back before we sort of made this pivot, the beauty industry, as I say, the beauty industry made this pivot. When you would look at a bottle, oftentimes, as you said, there'd be a million things, A, that you couldn't pronounce, and B, that you didn't know what they were. But somehow we trusted the products to put them on our face and our body, right? I mean, I've done that. Have you done that? Yeah. But now we're all about transparency and we want to know what's in it. Is that the same thing you're finding in the beauty industry?
Very much so. People are reading ingredient lists and they didn't know how to before. And with the resources that we have, the internet, influencers, podcasts, we have information at our fingertips, and everyone can become an expert in what they're interested in. So there are a lot of people starting at the teen years who are now becoming experts in beauty, and they're becoming critical, they're discerning, they're educating themselves, and looking for transparency. That is 100% happening.
And when they're looking for this transparency, does that also include the planet?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, Sephora, starting maybe 10 years ago, had a green, or not green, let's say a clean product initiative, where there were no lists for the first time. They're not including this, this, this. If you think about one of the first brands that did that, it was Drunk Elephant. And Drunk Elephant in skincare created one of the first free of lists, like no lists. So they weren't including parabens, they weren't including phthalates, a bunch of ingredients. And they were saying this is important to the customer for whatever, safety reasons mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So Sephora took that on for all of their clean products or clean brands about 10 years ago. That has evolved to become a more and more restrictive list. And now Sephora has taken that to another step, and now it's called clean and planet aware. Yes. So what that means is that the responsibility to the customer is not just what's in the jar, but it's also the jar itself, the folding carton that it comes in. Is it recyclable? Where is it sourced? Is it sourced? You can get plastic that's sourced from sugarcane. You can get virgin plastic that's just petroleum based. You can have a plastic that is PCR, post-consumer recycled plastic, but then that may not be recyclable. So there are a lot of decisions that a brand can make, and customers are asking for that transparency. Do they want to buy something in glass? It might be breakable, it might be too heavy, but it might be better for the planet. Or do they want to buy something that maybe is not recyclable, but it will fit in their purse and they can travel with it very easily? So it's helping customers have options And a lot of those options are the packaging as well. And that's more of the planet aware.
And how does, because as you're sitting here talking about glass and all these different kinds of things, I'm imagining that costs can go from one end of the spectrum to the next. So, what role does that play for both the businesses that are creating the product as well as the consumer?
Um, that is a consideration for everyone. So obviously, the brands don't make as much margin if the packaging is very expensive. There are refillable packages, for example, now, and those can be more expensive for a brand to produce because they have to produce the package, the outer package, and that usually comes with like a refillable pod. And then they have to also produce all of the pods separately, like the Keurig or whatever pods. So the minimums are higher. There are a lot of considerations, and that's not something that's affordable to every brand. Um, and customers, again, can decide what makes sense for them. It is for products that are sold at Credo, Goop, Whole Foods, and then in the Sephora Clean, and then the Clean and Planet Aware. That is more important because it's a commitment that they're agreeing to abide by to that retailer and to the customer. So that's just something that now is part of the ethos and part of when you create a product, you're going to allocate more money to packaging or to the formula as well. There are some ingredients that if you buy from a source that's not as well known, it might be less expensive. But if you buy from a validated ethical source, it may be more expensive. So brands, and I don't know if customers are as aware of the added expense, but brands and retailers certainly are.
Well, I mean, I know if I go to the store and I'm looking for a product, right? I want something that I think is better for me and better for the planet. And that includes the ingredients and the packaging. But I have a threshold, right? So everyone has their own threshold. And I guess I'm curious, you know, what role does education play for the companies, for the consumers, so that people can make more informed choices and understand the impact they're having by participating and making the choice to be more planet aware, buy something that's better for you?
So, have you heard of the term greenwashing?
Yes.
Okay, so we suffer from a lot of that in beauty because there are some things that are very difficult to accomplish. Recycling, for example, in most markets, in most cities, um, products that are under the size of a business card or a credit card generally are not recycled because that market, the facilities that they have, the machinery lets those size products fall through in the culling process. They just don't recycle something that's that big or that small, let's say. If you think about the cosmetic products that you buy, a lot of them are smaller than that. So if
Mm-hmm.
you say that a lipstick is recyclable, there you go. That could be recyclable, but in most areas, the recycling facilities will not recycle that. So it's fantastic. When I go to my recycling bin in my building, it's filled with tons of small containers, not just cosmetics. It could be, anything for food. It could be, I have a candle right now that is a tea light, small candle. It's glass. I will be putting it in the recycling, but I'm pretty certain that in New York, they won't recycle that. So part of it is greenwashing, where there are lots of brands, and they might be makeup brands, where everything is recyclable. But in all actuality, those products will not be recycled because of the facilities locally. People don't talk about that because the brands do want to do what is the most responsible, and they know that customers are going to be asking those questions. So there is not total transparency. Even if you wanted to recycle something that was a certain size, a place like Sephora or a Credo, sometimes they do have bins there where they will take care of recycling, but still there are not that many resources available to recycle a lot of beauty products.
I'm curious because you've worked on a variety of products in the last 20 years. Um, and I'm sure they weren't all very clean 20 years ago, were they? Right. I mean, how long ago did we start to see this trend where it really was something that people looked for?
I would say that clean or natural became very mainstream with the Body Shop. And the Body Shop was probably about 20 to 30 years ago. Um, I think that's
Do they
was
still
maybe at its
exist?
prime. You know what I'm talking about, the
I know
Body
what the
Shop,
Body
right?
Shop is, but I haven't seen a store in 100 years. Do they still
Exactly.
exist?
And I think it does exist, but maybe it's sold at Bath and Body Works. I'm not sure. And I
Okay,
think it exists in international markets. I'm not sure what really happened to it here. But it does exist because they got acquired again recently. So I don't know what
right.
the plan is for the future. But I'd say that the Body Shop started making clean, less crunchy and hippie, and I actually don't know how clean the formulas were, but they were very plant forward.
Okay,
So if you would be using an acne product previously, it would just say acne product. When the Body Shop came around, it would say tea tree oil and
hmm,
maybe other ingredients too, but it made people more familiar with the natural ingredients that provide skincare benefits. So that's when I think, let's say, greener formulas started appearing and became more common for a lot of people. And then the next round of that, in my opinion, was probably Drunk Elephant. And Drunk Elephant was the no no list. And now every brand has a no no list. Previously, I don't really remember seeing no no lists.
many doctors' offices, they use retinol, they use all these things, right, in their products. And we had actually wanted them, right? Like when we went there, we wanted them. So I'm wondering what role food, if you will be part of the evolution of the products that the doctors are selling.
That's tougher um, because most of the products that doctors are selling are very engineered. The ingredients are very engineered. So it's the most effective, newest technology, a new molecule that was made in at a university or by a pharmaceutical company. That usually doesn't come from a garden. That's
Right.
not something that you can't see far far back enough to when it was an actual source from the earth. So I don't think that that's going to impact clinical beauty as much in the future because a lot of times the patients or the customers who are going into doctors' offices or estheticians, getting facials and buying products there, they're comfortable buying very clinical, man-made, science-made products. And if you're comfortable with pharmaceuticals, even your aspirin is
Right.
very synthetic. So, and there's something called safe synthetics. So there are a lot of brands that are saying, okay, we're not natural necessarily, but in some cases, you'll buy a product that's natural or an ingredient that's natural. There are a lot of essential oils that can be very, very irritating. There are ingredients that are very difficult to source ethically. So there are safe synthetics. And those might be better for somebody with eczema or with sensitive skin or acne prone skin. It might not come out of the earth, but putting something that comes out of the earth on your face is not necessarily going to be less irritating or more effective. Efficacy is a lot of what people aren't willing to compromise.
I go to the dermatologist and I use products from there because I think there's a time and place for everything. You know, there are products, there are new innovations coming out that really do work in some ways that maybe you don't have to go to the dermatologist for some things, but there's still value in, for me at least, in some of the products that I get. I know you've worked on both sides of the coin, right? So,
Yeah, and I would say that the difference also between food and beauty is that products that you apply to your face or to anywhere in your body don't enter the bloodstream. So it does not, and they don't go through your digestive tract. So people who have gluten intolerance, gluten intolerance is different from celiac. Even celiac, with celiac, the Celiac Association of America, I think it's that one, um, says that you should not have an issue applying products that have wheat or gluten onto your face because they don't go through your digestive tract. If you have a severe gluten allergy, they would most likely recommend that you not do that, or products that are on the lips that you lick your lips and then it goes into you digest it. That's definitely an area that you might want to avoid gluten in. But for the most part, cosmetic products don't affect your body the same way as food. There have been some studies that are usually not really validated that show that some ingredients do enter your body in other ways. But for the most part, the FDA does not recognize that, a lot of them. But then from time to time, the FDA does say that there are ingredients like parabens. Parabens are just not allowed anymore because there has been evidence that they have a detrimental effect on the human body. So that's always changing. There might be an ingredient now that we use now we think is safe, and there is validated research in the future that tells us it's not safe to apply topically. Um, so it is evolving. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think you did. And I'm curious though. So, you've been on both sides. I'm wondering, in the last 20 to 30 years, since I guess Bed Bath and Beyond and then Drunk Elephant, it's kind of changed the trajectory of beauty. And I'm wondering what that looks like for the future as we continue on. Are there any, could you share maybe a couple innovations that you've been, that you're aware of that maybe you feel are pivotal in the future of beauty?
Well, I think you and I have talked about upcycled ingredients, which is really interesting and is happening now more than ever. And I mean, like in the last year, I've seen that as a selling point with a lot of ingredients. There's one that I'm familiar with that is derived from coffee grounds, because when you throw the coffee out, it's grounds and they go into a landfill usually. But then these companies are finding things to do with the byproducts, the waste products from food. So there's a coffee ingredient, there's a seaweed where the remnants of seaweed that might be used for other purposes is now used for cosmetic applications for hydration. That is the case with a lot of ingredients where the manufacturers are trying to find a purpose for the byproducts of what they're manufacturing. So it might be a food vendor, and then they're saying, what can we do with all of this orange pulp? Is there something to do with it? It might be turning it into packaging. So I've seen mushroom packaging recently, where I don't know that it's a byproduct. It might be, but it came out of some innovation someplace. Coffee grounds, can you turn coffee grounds into a folding carton? Probably, and if it hasn't been done yet, it will most likely be done in the future. So I do think that the future is using the whole plant as much as possible and not even putting plant ingredients into a landfill. So using the whole plant. That's one thing, is the upcycled. Traceability. So there are some brands where it'll tell you the exact lot of some of the active ingredients. So that happens a lot with CBD ingredients, where the company there might be a QR code, and you can scan your individual product, and it'll tell you when it was made, where it was made, and it will tell you the strain of CBD that was incorporated into your product and the farm that it was made on. Sometimes it'll even tell you, like, this is the farmer's name. It gets to a very granular level, but that transparency, so that you feel more confident in the ingredient that you're using, that has entered the beauty arena. Then additionally, I think more robust testing, safety testing. So there are a couple of tests that the industry has just said, we don't necessarily require them, but everybody does a certain safety testing.
So I'm curious, that's going to become more mainstream. People are leaning towards having more cleaner products. Is there a statistic you could share about how you see this change is going to impact or be impacted by the change in what we're putting in products and how we're testing them, and the whole idea of clean beauty.
I would refer you to a website like Sephora, where you
Okay.
can look at the percentage of the products that now comply with Sephora Clean versus just regular non-clean products. It's a big percentage. And I think that when these retailers are approaching new brands to come into Sephora, Credo, anywhere, the more transparent, the cleaner, the more natural, the more sustainable, um, the better. And that is being really um, communicated to these brands, that if you come to market, like lots of brands that I work with who are just starting are identifying their sustainability ethos from the very beginning. And from the very beginning, they know that these standards are being looked for by retailers and by customers. So statistically, I would say it's just the majority of brands, unless they're super, super clinical. Even if they're super clinical, they might be in a more sustainable package.
I'm curious, are there any ingredients that you think are just overlooked and really should get a second look by people and people innovating in this space?
I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because not every plant or technology that is available has been tested. So we found out that, let's say, licorice brightens skin, even skin tone, because somebody tested it. Maybe it started anecdotally, like my mom used licorice on me, and for this reason, and then eventually a lab and a manufacturer tested it, and they found out that licorice has that effect. We do see that happening, like turmeric. Also, a lot of times it's traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine that if this ingredient has been used for centuries, then maybe there's something to it. And then somebody will go and actually test it and isolate the molecule that has activity. So I think that have we tried heirloom tomatoes and tested heirloom tomatoes versus regular tomatoes? And do we know that they have more polyphenols than other tomatoes? I don't know. And then when you apply heirloom tomato paste onto your skin versus a regular tomato, will those antioxidants have a better effect than a regular tomato or another source of antioxidants entirely? So it's I don't know. I mean, like, I'm excited to see what gets tested, but there is an endless supply on this planet of products or sources that have not been tested yet. And I think there are entrepreneurial companies that are starting to find the next ingredient, the next efficacious ingredient. So I don't know. If I knew, then I'd probably be a lot more successful.
Oh, you're very successful, but regardless, and very knowledgeable. So as we start to wrap up, I just kind of want to tie it in a little pretty bow for everyone, and I also like to tie it back to those founders that come here looking for inspiration and looking to better understand as they build their new products, right? So if you could give three tips to those founders that are looking to build clean beauty from farm to product, maybe that's a thing, right? What would you recommend?
I would recommend that you partner with one of the contract manufacturers or labs that specialize in that. There are individuals and companies that is their expertise. Not every company will be able to tell you, or not every manufacturer will be able to tell you that there is an organic form of something, or that there's an ingredient called niacinamide. One of my clients is soon going to be launching with a niacinamide that is the first fermented niacinamide. That we asked the right lab, and the right lab told us that there were these options. So again, who you partner with, I think, is super important. Researching independently. There are some resources. There's something called UL Prospector. Letter U, the letter L, Prospector. We can put it in the show notes. And that is a database of raw materials, of ingredients for the beauty industry. Not absolutely everything is on there, but most things are on there. So if you decide you want to do a line that's all around raspberries and you put raspberries into UL Prospector, it will give you hundreds of ingredients that come from raspberries. And you can read the details there. It'll tell you what the source is. Does it come from this country or that country? Does it come from the seed of the raspberry? Does it come from the fruit of the raspberry or the stem of the raspberry or the leaf of the raspberry? So researching your own ingredients and being more and more well versed on what your options are, that I would say is super important. You can approach a chemist or a contract manufacturer, and we all have our preferences. That might not be your preference. So if you come to the table saying, I looked at this, this is really what I'm interested in, they may not sell you what their preference is as aggressively because you've done your research and you know you like raspberries. And then I would say third is also have an idea of where you do want to retail. So do you want to sell at Sephora, or are you going to do just direct to consumer? Are you going to be international? There are international regulations. Europe, for example, is more restrictive with a lot of ingredients than the US. And the US eventually adopts some of those rules. But right now, Europe is more restrictive than the US. Australia is more restrictive than the US. So try to aim big and maybe hope that your product is going to be global, but then make sure that you're formulating according to whatever rules you want.
Thank you so much, Tamar. So I'm really curious, just for those folks out there, that if they wanted to get in touch, maybe they were trying to build a product and they're looking for somebody to help build their product, how could they get in touch with you?
I would say to contact me on LinkedIn would probably be the most efficient. And if you send me a message on LinkedIn, then I will be happy to reply.
And we'll make sure to include your LinkedIn in the show notes, of course. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank you, Tamar, for joining me. I want to thank our guests for tuning in. And if you are watching this as a video cast, don't forget you can also listen to us as a podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, don't forget we do have a video cast on YouTube. So, and if you're not following us for clips and peeks into future episodes, you should, or I hope you will, at Essential Ingredients on Instagram. Thanks so much and have a great day. Thanks.